A father's love is supposed to be unbreakable. But what happens when that love turns into betrayal? Amy Fleming has always believed her dad, Tim, would stand by her side through every storm. But in season 19, that trust shatters in the most heartbreaking way. From the very beginning of Heartland, Amy's journey has been shaped by family, especially by her complicated but powerful relationship with her father, Tim Fleming. For years, Amy grew up with a mix of love and loss. Losing her mother at a young age was the deepest wound she carried, and it left her searching for a sense of stability. In many ways, Tim tried to step into that role, though not always in the right way. He was rough around the edges, stubborn, and often made decisions that put him at odds with his daughters. Still, despite his flaws, Amy held on to the belief that her father loved her, even when his actions suggested otherwise. Tim was not the picture-perfect dad. He had his battles with his past, his anger, and his choices, but through every trial, Amy kept giving him chances. She wanted to believe he could change, that he could be the man she and Lou needed him to be. Over the seasons, we saw flashes of that growth, moments when Tim showed up for Amy, stood by her dreams, and encouraged her as she carried on her mother's legacy of working with horses. Those moments made her trust in him grow stronger. And for Amy, trust was everything. Trust wasn't built overnight. It was something Amy gave carefully. When Tim was there for her after Ty's death, when he helped her navigate being a single mother, and when he backed her during hard times at the ranch, Amy began to see him less as the flawed man from her childhood and more as a father she could truly lean on. To her, this was progress. To her, it was healing. But underneath that bond, cracks remained. Tim was still Tim, sometimes selfish, sometimes impulsive, and often unwilling to admit when he was wrong. Amy forgave him again and again, brushing off his mistakes in the hope that he would finally learn from them. The truth was, Amy never stopped being that little girl who wanted her dad's approval, his honesty, and his love without conditions. This is what made the events of season 19 so devastating. For Amy, betrayal wasn't just about one choice Tim made. It was about everything she had given him: her trust, her forgiveness, and her heart being shattered in a single moment. This wasn't just another one of Tim's slip-ups. This was different. This was personal. As the story unfolds, we see that Amy's heartbreak doesn't come out of nowhere. It is the result of years of fragile hope being placed in the hands of a man who never truly let go of his flaws. And when that final betrayal happens, it cuts deeper than anything she has faced before. The pain doesn't come from a stranger. It doesn't come from a friend. It comes from her father, the one person she believed could never hurt her like this again. That is why this betrayal stands out as one of the most emotional and heart-wrenching storylines in Heartland's history. It's not just a fight. It's not just a misunderstanding. It's the breaking of a bond Amy thought was unshakable. And so, as season 19 takes us deeper into this conflict, we are forced to watch Amy wrestle with the question: how do you forgive the man who raised you, but also broke your heart? Every betrayal has a breaking point. For Amy, it wasn't a stranger. It wasn't an enemy. It was the one person she thought she'd never have to doubt. Her father, Tim. For years, Tim carried his mistakes like shadows. But in season 19, those shadows came rushing into the light, and Amy was the one left standing in the wreckage. The moment of betrayal didn't happen with a scream or an explosion. It began quietly, almost invisibly. A decision Tim made behind Amy's back. A secret he thought he could bury. But when secrets live too long in the dark, they have a way of tearing families apart. The betrayal centered on something sacred to Amy: the ranch, the horses, the legacy left by her mother. It was everything she had built her life around, the one constant she could trust when everything else was falling apart. But Tim, in his restless nature, saw things differently. Driven by pride, ambition, or maybe fear of losing control, he made a choice without Amy's knowledge. He struck a deal, one that put Heartland and Amy's place in it at risk. First, Amy didn't know. She noticed little changes, conversations Tim avoided, the way his eyes shifted when she asked about finances or plans for the ranch. He brushed her off with that same old stubbornness. "Don't worry about it, Amy. I've got it handled." But Amy knew her father. She knew when he was hiding something. Still, she wanted to trust him. She wanted to believe he wouldn't cross that line. Then came the moment she discovered the truth. Maybe it was a document left out on the table. Maybe it was a conversation overheard in the barn. However it happened, the truth hit her like a storm. Tim had betrayed her trust, not only by keeping her in the dark, but by making a decision that cut directly into her heart. He had put the ranch, her life's work, on the line without her voice, without her consent. For Amy, it wasn't just about the deal or the decision itself. It was about what it meant. It was proof that Tim didn't see her as an equal partner, proof that he didn't trust her enough to stand beside him in choices that shaped their family's future. After everything they had survived, after all the times she forgave him, this was the line he was never supposed to cross. The scene of confrontation was raw. Amy's voice shook, not out of anger at first, but out of disbelief. She asked him why. Why would he do this? Why, after all the promises he made, would he choose secrecy over honesty? And Tim, true to his nature, had excuses. He tried to justify it, saying he was protecting her, saying she had too much on her plate. But for Amy, those excuses cut even deeper. To her, it wasn't protection, it was betrayal. This wasn't just another one of Tim's reckless decisions. This was a breaking of trust at the very core. Amy's heartbreak wasn't about land or business, it was about loyalty. It was about the bond between a father and a daughter, and how easily it could shatter when honesty was replaced with lies. In that moment, the Heartland Ranch didn't feel like home to Amy. It felt like a battlefield, a place where her father had chosen his pride over her trust. And as her eyes filled with tears, it was clear this betrayal wasn't something she could forgive with a quick apology. It was something that would linger, like a scar, in every corner of her heart. What hurts more, the betrayal itself, or realizing the person you trusted most never saw you the way you thought they did? For Amy, the pain wasn't loud. It wasn't anger exploding in the air. It was silent, heavy, and sharp. The kind of pain that lingers in the chest, making every breath harder than the last. She sat alone in the barn after the truth came out, surrounded by the horses that had always given her comfort. But this time, even their quiet presence couldn't heal her. Because this wound wasn't from a stranger, it was carved into her heart by her father. Amy's mind replayed everything like broken glass, cutting deeper with each memory. All the times she stood by Tim, even when others doubted him. All the times she defended him when people called him reckless, selfish, or unreliable. She remembered telling herself, "He's my dad. He loves me. That's enough." But in this moment, none of that felt true anymore. The love she believed in suddenly felt conditional, fragile, and almost fake. In her silence, Amy asked herself questions she never thought she'd face. Was I ever truly seen by him? Was I just a little girl he wanted to protect, not a woman strong enough to make her own choices? Or worse, was I just another part of the ranch he thought he could control? The betrayal wasn't just about Heartland, it was about identity. Heartland was Amy's life, her mother's legacy, her promise to Ty, and her gift to her daughter. And Tim's secret deal had thrown all of that into uncertainty. She felt stripped of power, like her voice had been erased in her own story. And that cut deeper than any argument ever could. Nights grew longer for Amy. She couldn't sleep without replaying the moment she found out. She couldn't walk through the ranch without feeling like every fence post, every horse stall, every field carried Tim's shadow over her choices. The betrayal became a ghost she couldn't escape. And with every passing day, the anger began to grow. Not wild, fiery anger, but a cold, steady anger that comes when disappointment hardens into resolve. Still, a part of Amy longed for answers. Part of her hoped Tim would come to her, not with excuses, but with truth. A real apology. A recognition that he had broken her heart in a way words couldn't fix. But each time she saw him, she saw the same defenses, the same stubborn pride, the same refusal to admit the damage he caused. And that's when Amy began to realize forgiveness might not come this time. Her struggle wasn't just about what Tim had done, it was about what she was supposed to do next. Does she forgive him, knowing he might hurt her again? Or does she walk away, knowing it could shatter the family even more? Both paths were painful. Both paths meant loss. And in that impossible choice, Amy felt more alone than she had ever felt in her life. When one heart breaks inside a family, the echoes reach everyone. And at Heartland, Tim's betrayal didn't just wound Amy, it shook the entire foundation of those who loved her. The first to feel the weight was Lou. She had always carried the role of protector, the older sister who wanted to shield Amy from pain. When she learned what Tim had done, her anger wasn't quiet, it was fierce. To Lou, this wasn't just about a bad decision. It was about watching her little sister, who had already endured the loss of Ty, being forced to suffer yet another heartbreak, this time at the hands of their own father. Lou confronted Tim with sharp words, her voice breaking as she demanded how he could risk carrying Amy down when she was finally finding her strength again. But even as she scolded him, Lou's eyes carried sorrow, because deep down, she knew this fracture between Amy and Tim might never fully heal. Then there was Jack. Jack Bartlett the Rock, the steady hand who had been the anchor of Heartland for decades. Jack had seen Tim make mistakes before. He had forgiven him, scolded him, and guided him. But this betrayal cut Jack too. Because Jack wasn't just Amy's grandfather, he was her second father. And seeing Amy's trust broken reminded him of old wounds, of Marion, of promises Tim had made years ago but failed to keep. Jack's disappointment wasn't loud. It was heavy silence, the kind that makes a man's shoulders slump under the weight of too many letdowns. To Amy, that silence said more than words ever could. Her pain was real, and she wasn't alone. Even the younger ones felt it. Katie and Lindy, too young to fully understand, sensed the tension in every hushed conversation, every slammed door, every night when Amy sat with tears she tried to hide. For Lindy, watching her mom cry was confusing and scary. Amy had always been her strength, her safe place. And now, that safe place felt shaken. The betrayal wasn't just a story between father and daughter anymore, it was spilling into the lives of the next generation, and the ranch itself, the beating heart of this family, seemed to reflect the fracture. Work became harder, meals were quieter. What once felt like the unshakable rhythm of Heartland life now carried an invisible tension. Horses picked up on Amy's sadness, reacting skittishly. Chores went undone as family members avoided one another. The betrayal had planted itself like a thorn, reminding everyone that trust, once broken, doesn't just affect two people, it affects everyone tied to them. Friends of the family, too, began to notice. Georgie, when she visited, was quick to stand by Amy, reminding her she was strong enough to survive this pain. Others, like Lisa, tried to mediate, reminding both Tim and Amy that family can survive anything if love is still present. But for Amy, love wasn't the question. Trust was. And that's something even the closest family couldn't simply patch back together. In the end, the impact of Tim's betrayal wasn't measured in angry words or shouting matches, it was measured in the spaces between them. The silences at the dinner table, the sideways glances when Tim entered a room, the way Amy's smile seemed dimmer, her laugh quieter. Heartland was still standing, but the family within it felt like it was standing on cracks. And if those cracks widened, they all feared the whole foundation might crumble. Every broken bond faces a moment of truth. And for Amy, that moment came when silence was no longer enough. The barn was quiet that evening, the golden light of the sunset spilling through the old wooden beams. Amy stood there, her hands brushing against Spartan's mane, but her mind was far away. She had replayed Tim's betrayal 1,000 times in her head, every excuse, every justification. But there was no peace in the replays, no relief in the memories. There was only one thing left to do: face him. When Tim walked in, he looked tired. His steps were heavy, but his pride was still visible in the way he held his shoulders. For a moment, there was silence between them, broken only by the restless shuffle of a horse nearby. Then Amy turned to him, her eyes steady, her voice firm, carrying the weight of both heartbreak and resolve. "Why, Dad?" she asked, the words low but sharp. "Why would you do this to me? To us?" Tim opened his mouth, ready with the same old defenses. "I was trying to protect you. You wouldn't understand. I thought it was best." But Amy didn't let him finish. This time, she wasn't the forgiving daughter, waiting for him to change. This time, She was stronger. You don't get to decide what's best for me. You don't get to take away my choices. Not after everything I've been through. Her voice wavered, not with weakness, but with the raw power of truth. I trusted you. I defended you. And you broke that trust, Dad. You broke me. Tim's face shifted, his pride cracking under the weight of her words. For once, he couldn't hide behind excuses. He couldn't outrun the truth. But still, he struggled because admitting fault was never easy for him. Amy stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. Do you even realize what you've done? This isn't about the ranch. This isn't about business. This is about family. And you chose pride over honesty. You chose control over trust. Her words landed like blows, but they weren't meant to hurt, they were meant to reveal. For Amy, this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about reclaiming her strength, her voice, her place in a family where she had been treated like someone to protect instead of someone to respect. Tim tried to reach for her, his voice softer now. Amy, I thought I was doing the right thing. She shook her head, tears glimmering but refusing to fall. The right thing doesn't leave me feeling like I don't matter. The right thing doesn't leave me standing here questioning whether my own father respects me. In that moment, the turning point arrived, not because Tim suddenly changed, but because Amy did. She no longer needed his approval to feel whole. She no longer needed his excuses to keep forgiving him. For the first time, she saw her father not as the man she wished he could be, but as the man he truly was. And in that clarity, Amy made her choice. She wouldn't shut him out completely because love, no matter how broken, still lived in her heart. But she would no longer let his actions define her, control her, or silence her. She would stand on her own, with or without his trust. The confrontation didn't end with forgiveness. It didn't end with reconciliation. It ended with truth, raw, painful, and unshakable. And in that truth, Amy found her strength again. I can't carry your mistakes anymore, Dad, she whispered. I have to carry myself. As she walked away, the silence left behind was heavier than words, but it was also freeing. For the first time in a long time, Amy felt like she was standing tall, even if it meant standing alone. Amy walked out of the barn that night with her head high, but her heart still fractured. The air was cool, the sky painted with stars, yet nothing felt steady. Heartland, her safe haven, no longer felt the same. The ranch wasn't broken on the outside, it was broken within. And that fracture carried a question no one could answer. Could Amy and Tim ever find their way back to each other? Tim stood alone in the barn long after she left, staring at the space where Amy had stood. For once, he didn't have words. His pride, the very thing that drove him to make the choice, now weighed heavier than ever. He could fix fences. He could train horses. But how do you fix a daughter's broken trust? The silence of that night felt like a prophecy. Because betrayal doesn't end with a single confrontation, it ripples. It lingers in every choice they make moving forward. Amy might carry her strength, but the scar of Tim's decision would follow her. And Tim, stubborn as ever, now faced the possibility of losing the very daughter he had spent years trying to hold close. But the cliffhanger isn't just about their fractured bond. There's a shadow over Heartland itself. The ranch's future is uncertain, Amy's role is changing, and Tim's decisions have opened a door that can't easily be closed. As season 19 continues, whispers of more challenges ahead stir in the background. Amy will have to decide not only whether to forgive Tim, but whether she can even let him be part of the life she's building for herself and her daughter. And so the questions remain, unanswered but burning. Will Amy's strength be enough to rebuild what Tim destroyed? Will Tim finally confront his pride, or will he lose his daughter forever? And most importantly, is this betrayal the beginning of the end for the Heartland family as we know it? The screen fades, leaving the audience with nothing but silence, suspense, and the echo of Amy's words. I can't carry your mistakes anymore, Dad. I have to carry myself.